The big question that Etsy sellers are wondering is, will Temu put an end to Etsy? Will it put Etsy out of business? Heck, will it put Amazon out of business? Because right now, Temu is blowing up and you're seeing ads everywhere. And guess what? We're also seeing them take product images from our Etsy shops and using them on Temu. And there's nothing that we can really do about it. So the question is, what are we going to do? There was actually an article written recently, which we're going to dig into that. And I've got Chris Schaefer here with me to kind of go through this as far as what kind of hit has this already done? And should we be concerned with Temu and Etsy? So, Chris, why don't you pull that article up if you would do so, please?
What we can see is that they're saying, is it an orange flag for Etsy, right? They're saying, is this the end of Etsy as we know it? And Scott, people may or may not know there's about 28 different versions of this article. But what people may or may not know is the rise of Temu over the last few years has meant a huge decrease in what Amazon has in the apparel category. And it's not to say that that's a one-for-one reason, right?
Sure.
But it correlates pretty darn well. And if we look at the Q4 report from Etsy, what was that biggest growth? The biggest growth category? It was clothing and apparel, right? So if they're coming into the US and taking up more of the market share, is that something that's going to negatively affect Etsy? And this article specifically is looking at the impact that it's having on the market share of Wayfair, because they're more like an Amazon, right? It's an everything type of a store.
Yeah.
So, whether it's furniture and decorations like you'd find on Wayfair, or whether it's clothing. And our good friend, Steve Chu, recently had somebody on who has a great e-commerce business selling different t-shirts, much like many people do on Etsy, although he does most of his business on his own website. He saw a dramatic drop and attributes that to Temu as well. So we're seeing that on individual e-commerce sites. We're seeing Amazon starting to struggle in that category. Before we even dive into all of the ins and outs of Temu, Scott, what does that tell you about protecting yourself in the Etsy ecosystem? Is there anything sellers should be paying attention to from those two lessons before we even dive into some of the ins and outs?
Well, it's things that we've talked about before. And I think, yes, there's always going to be a knockoff market, right? That people that they're going to find it somewhere else, but they're also going to probably find that the quality is not going to be there, and then they can be disappointed. But I think the big thing here for us as Etsy sellers is to, number one, have great products. Number two, continue to offer personalization. Number three, make sure that you are doing an amazing job with customer service, because that's where I think Temu will probably lack. I can't say for certain, but that's why we talk about building a brand, because if someone buys from our shop, we're building somewhat of some brand loyalty. Okay. And they're not just coming to our shop to buy a one-off of something, right? Temu, yes, you're able to go on there and buy a bass fishing shirt, and then you're going to go search for something else, and you're doing it because it's cheap. But also you're not getting it as quick. A lot of times it takes 2 to 3 weeks before you get it. So that's another side of it. So me personally, and Chris, I think I'm answering your question, is like, we can still do these things to make ourselves stand out amongst a Temu, because we are able to now still deliver a better product in a better experience. And I think Etsy is going to be aware of this, and Etsy's going to try to also make it where they don't take over their platform.
Maybe, do you think possibly that's why they trademarked gift mode and they're doing the gift mode push? They're saying,
probably,
Temu, if you want just a random junk, you can go to Temu. But if you want a gift that somebody's really going to like, come to Etsy. And I think there's a couple interesting things that came out of that article, Scott. The first one was they're saying, hey, they're kind of eating everybody's lunch right now. But what they don't share in that article, and I believe Wired did an article on this, I think it was last summer. They said the reason prices are so low on Temu is twofold. One, the labor practices used by a lot of the producers, not so hot, right? And number two, they're actually losing an average of $30 per order. So the question is, can they outspend Amazon, Etsy, Wayfair, all of these places to get enough market share before the capital runway runs out at losing $30 an order? Or can we kind of resist against that headwind long enough? And the answer to that is that should be the goal for anybody on Etsy. If we have a single product focused store, we're creating just designs for t-shirts, just designs for coffee mugs, chances are that Temu's entry into the US market could eat your lunch because they're able to produce it for literally pennies on the dollar and ship it using some of the loopholes in international shipping laws to get it to you in as little as 3 to 5 days, even though sometimes that will extend out to, 7 to 10 to maybe even 2 weeks in some cases. So while this seems scary, and while a lot of people are buying on Temu, there's a couple things that we probably want to keep in mind with this. The first is that capital runway running out. The $30 loss per order, that's not something that they can sustain forever. Even if you have the entire government of China behind you, at some point they're gonna be like, hey, this is just silly, right? We're
Yeah.
not winning. Thing number two is the repeat buyers. And Scott, this speaks to the customer service side of this. This speaks to the personalization side of this. This speaks to the product selection and quality side of this. A lot of the stuff on Temu is not as good as the stuff that you would find other places. Some of it's great, right? But because they're producing things at such a low cost, you do have some of those issues. Just like, Scott, do you remember Wish.com and how that blew up a little while ago? And it was like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, Wish.com is going to eat Amazon's lunch. And then when you actually got stuff from Wish.com that you paid $5 for the newest AMD
Yeah.
graphics card or whatever it was, right? Like the newest AMD processor or a new Intel chip for your computer, it came and it was like a toy version for $2. Makes sense, right? What we see with Temu is that they're not getting the repeat customers. And if you guys have seen the video that we did on Etsy's Q4 report, you will know that Etsy's goal is repeat buyers. And one of the things, Scott, in this article that really stuck out to me was the number of repeat buyers. And I want to see if I can find it here. 30% of customers who purchased from Temu in September returned a month later. However, only 4% of them were still returning 14 months. Or sorry, 4 months later, right? So it dropped in just a few months during the hottest gifting time of the year. It dropped by half in terms of return customers because people are having issues with quality. People are having issues with timelines. People are having some issues with some of the labor practices. People are having issues with a lot of things with Temu. So just because they're coming into the market and it feels like they are the 900-pound gorilla in the room right now, does not mean that they're going to eat everybody's lunch. It does not mean that they're going to crush Etsy. It does mean we have to pay a little bit of attention to the things that we're doing. But the good news, at least in my mind, Scott, and I want to get your opinion on this as well, is the things that we can do to build our walls, shore up our defenses, are the things that any good business should be doing anyway. Focusing on the customer service, focusing on creating repeat customers, focusing on good quality products and great designs that people are looking for. Is there anything that I'm missing there?
No, no. I mean, okay, so it's valid concerns. Like, I mean, for us to sit here and say like it's not a valid concern, it is. And I saw in the comments, someone had said, yeah, I've been seeing people buy stuff from Temu and then selling it on Etsy. Is that okay? That's going to be hard to police because you're not saying it's coming from Temu. You're just basically doing what we used to do with Alibaba and AliExpress. You're buying something at a discount and you're selling it. People do that, by the way, right now on eBay. You buy stuff on eBay and then sell it on Etsy, or vice versa. Buy it on Etsy, sell it on eBay. Like, people have been doing that for years. So there's nothing really that's going to prevent that, other than, I do believe, because Etsy is going down this gift route, the more personalization, customization you can do will make it harder for you to be knocked off. So I would say I would be leaning into that as much as I could, or making something that isn't as easy to copy. Now, I'm not saying that Temu can't do personalization, because they'll probably do that if they aren't already, right? But my thing is number one, it is going to take longer to get there. And it's not going to have the same level of customer service, I believe. And I think you building that rapport with a customer goes a long, long way.
What are your thoughts on them opening up the US market to US sellers? Do you think this will pull sellers away from Etsy? Or is that something that we don't really have to, I don't know if worry about would be the right word. If they do, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I guess is the better version of that question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to it. I don't think anybody knows the answer. But I also think that if all we're doing is we're playing defense and not offense, we're not going to grow. So what you could do is think about your business and think about, how do I create better products that are more unique? How do I serve my customer? And how do I build a relationship with my customer? And as silly as that sounds, it could be literally you creating your welcome message, letting people know that you're a mother with 3 kids and you're married and you started this business so you could stay home with your kids. Like, you say that versus someone just getting a random thing on TEMU, it's gonna go so far. I can't tell you how many times people reach out to my wife and they tell my wife their life story, but also say, "Oh, I grew up in that area too," or I'm about your age," or "Oh, I have 3 kids too," right? Like, there's things that I guess is overlooked in business by just the relationship and the customer service side and having products that are unique, right? So we put all that together. And what I'm saying here too is, like, you have to work at building your email list, building your customer base. And that's offense. That's not defense. We're not sitting here going like, "Oh, how do I help, or how do I prevent them from stealing my stuff? How do I put watermarks on everything? And how do I do?" That's all defense. But offense is like, how do I get my customer to know me better? How do I get my customer to buy another thing? How do I follow up with my customer? Like, how do I get more reviews? Those are all things that are offensive moves that can increase your sales and build brand loyalty. That's what I would say there.
So, a quick hypothetical, and it's just something I'm thinking about here. So, Temu gives you a one-click button to import all your Etsy listings. Same price, whatever. Is that something you are considering doing in that world? Are you adding them in as a sales channel the way it is right now? If you could import everything at the click of a button, obviously it's your quality. So if people are buying from you, they're still getting that quality. Is it enticing to you as an Etsy seller to include them as another channel, or is there a better place to spend your time, energy, and effort, at least right now, while we're waiting to see if they're going to stick around?
That's a great question. Like, I don't know if we have the answer to that. I think it comes down to, do you want your products represented on that platform? Does it cheapen your brand? Or is it a sales channel that you want to explore? I know personally right now we're not exploring it. Not saying that we wouldn't, but again, I think it comes down to, how do you want your products and your brand to be represented? We in this bit here that we're talking about, we weren't necessarily talking about it as a sales channel for us, although it could be. We're more or less looking at it like people are stealing stuff and then putting it up on Temu. And I saw a comment come through and said, yeah, they took my pictures, even with my watermarks, and just put them up there. Right. So that is a problem. We saw that with Amazon though. Like, we saw, and actually it's funny. My wife had customers say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I found this on Amazon merch, and I know it's not you because it's not your name. I just wanted to let you know." And then my wife goes on defense and starts, basically getting these people off. But then all of a sudden it turns into a full-time job. And then it's like, I'm saying to her, "Hey, we got to just stop playing defense and go to offense." And that's what we did. And now, I mean, it's happening, but what are you going to do? Right? You can sit here. You have to decide what is going to be best for you. And right now, maybe that is a sale channel that you can explore if all you have to do is click a few buttons and get your products up there to test it. Kind of like Walmart and Amazon back in the day. Like, you would take your Amazon product, put them up on Walmart, or vice versa. Same thing with eBay. So it is a sales channel. It's not proven yet, at least for me. And I don't know it's the right clientele.
Yeah, and that I think is why I propose that as a hypothetical, right? Like, if they're gonna steal your stuff anyway, and you're getting a lot of those people coming back to you, like what's happening with Amazon merch, is it worth throwing the listing up because it's one click of a button? Maybe, but then you also have to think about how that's being used on the back end and how that represents your brand. So if you're interested in pursuing it, they are going to be opening that up. And I don't want to stop anybody from potentially looking at it. But to your point, Scott, the better place to focus is on growing the on-site stuff on Etsy, is on building out the things that are going to make you a real brand, and potentially looking at your own website where you actually control that as well. And regardless of whether you decide to add it, if you wanted to add in Temu, we need to pay attention to those things and keep in the back of our mind that it's a platform, and at any moment Temu could go away, or they could pull the old Amazon. Hey, this product sells really well. Let's create 900 knockoffs of it and, create Temu basics and just go from there. And if we contribute to that, then are we diluting our own profit at the end of the day? And the answer is probably yes. So if you're going to look at
Yeah.
something like Temu, I'm not going to tell you not to, but I will say do all of the basic brand building stuff first, shore up your defenses, start building that email list, look at your own website, and really master what you're doing inside of the Etsy ecosystem and focus on making that defensible. And then potentially consider adding in your TikTok shops, your Temu, all of these
Mhm.
other places that are starting to pop up.